The glass jar trembled on the surgical tray. Inside, something white twisted against the sterile container. 17 of them, each one alive, each one pulled from beneath a man's skin. Dr. Rebecca Walsh counted silently, her latex gloves stained, her face grave behind the surgical mask. But these weren't the real horror. Robert Harrison, 52 years old, lay unconscious on the operating table. In the waiting room, his daughter Sarah clutched her mother's faded blue shirt, praying to a God she'd stopped believing in 4 years ago. What the doctors would find buried deeper, hidden for 20 years beneath scar tissue and silence, would shatter everything. A bullet, not shrapnel. A war crime covered up. 19 families who owed him their lives, though he'd spent 2 decades believing he'd failed them all. 6 weeks earlier, it had begun with what he thought was just a pimple. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. The morning sun rose over coastal Maine, painting the weathered blue clapboard house in shades of gold. Population 3,200. The kind of town where everyone knew your name and your business. An American flag hung motionless on the porch, waiting for wind that wouldn't come. Inside, Robert Harrison moved through his morning routine with the precision of a man who'd done this for 4 years. 2 coffee mugs appeared on the counter, an old habit from 46 years of marriage. He filled both, black, no sugar. Stared at the second cup for a long moment, then quietly poured it down the sink. The kitchen held everything in its place, yet nothing felt like home. 2 blue shirts hung in the bedroom closet, side by side. One showed the wear of weekly washing. The other hadn't been touched since Beth died, still carrying the faint scent of her perfume if you pressed your face close enough. Rob never did. Looking at it hurt enough. His phone buzzed on the counter, one text from Sarah sent an hour ago. His thumb hovered over the screen. He could see the preview. Dad, just checking. He locked the phone without opening it, slid it into his pocket. At the closet, he chose a long-sleeved shirt, despite the forecast calling for 85 degrees. The fabric felt heavy, necessary. On the nightstand, Beth smiled at him from their wedding photo, forever young, forever whole. He forced himself to look away. "Max!" His voice echoed through the empty house. Silence. "Max! Come on, boy!" The border collie emerged slowly from beneath the kitchen table, a shadow instead of his usual burst of energy. 10 years old, gray creeping into his muzzle. But the hesitation felt wrong. When Rob reached down to pet him, his hand naturally found the dog's back. Max flinched, pulled away. Rob froze. In 10 years, Max had never once pulled away from his touch. "You okay, buddy?" He tried again, gentler. This time Max allowed it, but Rob felt something under the black and white fur. Small, raised, like a bump. The fur around Max's collar looked wet, matted from licking. "Probably nothing," Rob said to the empty kitchen. "Getting old, aren't we all?" But his hand moved unconsciously to his own lower back, touching the same relative spot through his shirt, a gesture so automatic he didn't register doing it. The bathroom medicine cabinet held a bottle of aspirin, 2/3 empty. He'd been reaching for it more often lately. Outside, the flag finally caught a breeze, snapping once before falling still again. Monday morning, Rob stood in the shower, reaching back to wash between his shoulder blades. His fingers found something unexpected, a small raised bump, about the size of a pea. He pressed it gently, tender but not painful, probably just a pimple, he muttered to the tile walls. I'm 52, not 15. He tried twisting to see it in the mirror, but the angle was impossible. The steam had fogged the glass anyway. He dismissed it, dried off, and forgot about it before his coffee finished brewing. Tuesday arrived with ritual. Blue Shirt Day. 46 years of marriage, Beth had insisted they both wear blue every Tuesday. Our day, she'd called it. Her shirt still hung beside his in the closet, unwashed since the funeral, preserved like a museum piece he couldn't bear to touch, yet couldn't put away. Rob's fingers lingered on the fabric of her shirt for just a moment before pulling back as if burned. He buttoned his own blue shirt carefully. When the collar rubbed against the bump, a small spark of pain made him wince. He ignored it. By Friday, the bump had grown to the size of a dime, warm to the touch, surrounded by a red ring that looked angry against his pale skin. Rob pulled out his phone and typed, "Skin bump adult male." The results reassured him. Common causes: ingrown hair, cyst, insect bite. Usually harmless. See a doctor if it doesn't improve in 2 weeks. See? He said to Max, who was sleeping under the porch instead of following him to the boat. Nothing. Saturday brought a discovery that should have alarmed him more than it did. While petting Max, his hand found a small bump on the dog's back, roughly the same size and location as his own. Max's tail thumped weakly against the floor. Same thing, Rob reasoned aloud. Must be Maine mosquitoes. They're vicious this year. He drove to the pharmacy and bought anti-itch cream, applying it to both himself and Max, with the confidence of a man who'd solved a problem. The cream did nothing. By the second Monday, Rob's bump had swelled to the size of a quarter, darker red now, with a small hole appearing in the center that made his stomach turn when he finally managed to see it in the mirror. He looked away quickly. Max now had 3 bumps scattered across his back. The dog's food bowl, usually licked clean by 7 each morning, sat half full. Rob watched Max pick at his breakfast with growing unease. Wednesday morning, Rob pulled his shirt over his head and felt it stick to the bump. When he peeled the fabric away, a small yellow stain marked where the bump had been pressed. The smell hit him. Faintly sweet, fundamentally wrong. His stomach lurched. He threw the shirt directly into the wash and turned the water to hot. Thursday brought the realization he'd been avoiding. Max had 7 bumps now, maybe more hidden under the thick fur. The dog scratched constantly, whimpering when his paws made contact. Rob picked up his phone 3 separate times to call the veterinarian. 3 times he set it back down. Vet bills started at $200 just to walk through the door. It would clear up when the weather cooled. He was being paranoid. These were the lies he told himself while pouring a 3rd beer, then a 4th, when he usually stopped at 2. Friday evening, Max refused to play fetch for the first time in 10 years. He simply looked at the ball, then back at Rob with eyes that seemed to say, "I can't." Rob sat beside him on the porch steps, the ball forgotten in his hand. "What's wrong, buddy?" He scratched behind Max's ears, the one spot that didn't seem to hurt. "You're scaring me." But not scared enough to call the vet. Not yet. Sunday evening at 7 o'clock sharp, Sarah called. She always called at 7 on Sundays. Had for 4 years now, ever since the funeral, when Rob had told her to go back to Boston, to give him space. "A while," he'd said. "Just a while." 4 years was a long while. Dad, you sound tired. Are you sleeping? Fine. Just busy season on the boat. Is Max okay? You haven't mentioned him? Rob looked at Max, curled under the table, and felt his throat tighten. He's fine. Getting older. You know how it is. A pause on the line. Dad, when was your last checkup? His jaw clenched involuntarily. Sarah, I'm fine. Don't need doctors poking around. That's what you said about Mom. Her voice carried an edge he pretended not to hear. Right up until, that's not fair. The silence stretched between them. 200 miles of telephone line carrying everything they couldn't say. The call ended 5 minutes later with the usual pleasantries, leaving both of them unsatisfied and alone. Monday of the third week, Rob woke to find his pillowcase stained yellow. He stripped the bed without looking at it too closely, stuffing the sheets into the washing machine with hands that trembled slightly. 3 bumps now marked his back, all leaking clear fluid that dried into crusty patches on his shirts. He switched to wearing only dark colors, hiding the evidence even from himself. Tuesday, Blue Shirt Day, felt like a betrayal. He put on a black t-shirt instead, unable to meet Beth's blue shirt hanging in the closet. Some rituals hurt too much to maintain. Max had 12 bumps scattered across his back and sides. The dog barely touched his food, managing only a few bites before walking away. When Rob tried to pet him, Max whimpered before he even made contact, flinching from the anticipated pain. Wednesday night at 2 a.m, Rob gave up trying to sleep. He stood at the bedroom window, staring out at the dark Atlantic, watching lighthouse beams sweep across black water. Max limped over and collapsed at his feet with a soft groan. Rob knelt beside him, careful not to touch the infected areas. I'm sorry, boy, he whispered to the darkness. I should have done something sooner. The words hung in the air, carrying more weight than they should. He wasn't just talking about Max. I'm doing to you what I did to Beth. Waiting too long. Always waiting too long. Thursday morning brought a new level of horror. Rob's bumps had turned angry red, swollen, and hot to the touch. The skin around them looked grayish, the color of something dying. When he removed his shirt, the smell made him gag, sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. He opened his laptop and typed with shaking fingers. Infected skin bumps won't heal. The results mentioned serious infections, parasites, abscess requiring immediate medical attention. His hands trembled as he closed the browser. That night he drank 5 beers, then a 6th, sitting alone on the porch until the bottle was empty and the stars blurred together. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of Maine dawn that usually filled Rob with peace. He and Max walked toward the fishing boat dock at 6:30, the sunrise painting everything gold. Max followed 10 paces behind instead of his usual position at Rob's heel. The change registered somewhere in Rob's mind, but didn't alarm him. Not yet. They were halfway across the dusty parking lot when it happened. Max took his 5th step. His front right leg trembled. 6th step. The left leg buckled beneath him. On the 7th step, he tried to catch himself, muscles straining. The 8th step never came. Max collapsed onto his side, unable to rise, breathing in rapid, shallow pants. Rob stood frozen for 3 full seconds, his brain refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. Then he was moving, dropping to his knees so hard the impact sent shocks of pain up his thighs. His hands reached for Max, pulled back, reached again, terrified of causing more pain, desperate to help, paralyzed between the 2 impulses. Max? His voice came out strangled. Max, buddy? The dog's eyes looked unfocused, the third eyelid showing white at the corners. His body burned with fever. Rob could feel the heat radiating through the fur without even touching him. The breathing came faster now, panicked, wrong. Not you too. The words tore themselves from somewhere deep in Rob's chest. I can't. I already lost Beth. I can't lose you. Tears came for the first time since Beth's funeral. Hot and unstoppable, blurring his vision as he gathered Max into his arms. 60 pounds of limp dog. His back screamed in protest, sharp, familiar pain shooting from that spot near his spine where the old injury lived. He ignored it completely. Pain didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting Max help. Hold on, boy. He carried Max toward his truck, talking constantly, filling the silence with his voice like a lifeline. I've got you. You hear me? I'm not leaving you. You're going to be okay. We're going to fix this. His shirt soaked through with Max's sweat and his own tears. The dog's breathing rattled in his chest, each inhale sounding like it might be the last. Rob placed Max as gently as he could on the passenger seat, then ran around to the driver's side. His hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. 25 minutes to Harborview Animal Hospital. He made it in 18, pushing 70 in a 45 zone, running 2 stop signs without even seeing them. One hand on the wheel, the other on Max, feeling for the rise and fall of breath, terrified it would stop. Stay with me, he repeated like a prayer. Please, Max. Please stay with me. The truck fishtailed into the hospital parking lot, tires screaming. Rob didn't bother to park properly, just slammed it into park wherever it stopped and lifted Max again, cradling him against his chest. The automatic doors of Harborview Animal Hospital seemed to take forever to open. When they finally did, Rob burst through them like a man possessed, his voice breaking as he shouted to the startled receptionist, "My dog is dying!" The young receptionist, Amy, looked up from her computer screen, eyes widening at the sight of Rob's wild expression and the limp dog in his arms. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" "He can't breathe!" Rob's voice cracked, raw with desperation. A door opened immediately. Dr. Rebecca Walsh emerged from the examination area, a woman in her late 40s with iron-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. She held a coffee mug in one hand, wearing blue scrubs that marked her as just starting her morning shift. One look at Rob's face told her everything she needed to know. Bring him back, now. Rob followed her through the door marked Staff Only, his legs moving on autopilot. Examination Room 3, sterile steel table, fluorescent lights humming overhead. He laid Max down as gently as he could, hands lingering on the dog's head. "I'm right here," he whispered.
"I'm right here, buddy."
Dr. Walsh washed her hands at the sink, pulled on latex gloves with practiced efficiency. She'd been Rob's veterinarian for 8 years, had seen him through the death of his old retriever, had met Beth twice before the cancer took her. She'd watched this man slowly hollow out over the past 4 years, becoming a ghost who walked through routine without really living. Now, finally, she saw him fully present. Terrified, yes. Broken open, yes. But alive, in a way he hadn't been in years. She began her examination with gentle hands, starting at Max's head and working backward. When she reached his back, she paused, pulled out a magnifying lamp and adjusted it over the dog. 5, 8, 10. She counted aloud, her voice ticking on a clinical edge. 15, 18. Her face went pale. Jesus, there's more. Rob stood against the wall, his cowboy hat crushed between white-knuckled hands. What are they? Dr. Walsh didn't answer immediately. She pulled out her phone and snapped several close-up photographs under the lamp's bright light, then counted again to be sure. 20, maybe 21. I need to look closer. She checked Max's vitals with swift efficiency. Digital thermometer in the ear. Temperature 104.2. That's high fever territory. Stethoscope to the chest. Heart rate 145. Elevated. She watched the dog's breathing. Respiratory rate 35. He's in distress. Can you fix him? Rob's voice was barely above a whisper. When did these bumps first appear? Maybe 3 weeks ago. Shame colored his words. Started small. Did you treat them with anything? Anti-itch cream? The admission felt like a confession. When did his behavior change? Week ago. Stopped eating much. Dr. Walsh looked up from Max, her eyes meeting Rob's with an intensity that made him want to look away. Why didn't you bring him in sooner? Rob opened his mouth, closed it. Tears streamed down his face unchecked. I don't know. I thought they'd go away. His voice dropped to barely audible. I do this. I wait too long. I did it with my wife. Now Max. The sentence hung unfinished in the antiseptic air. Dr. Walsh's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Mr. Harrison, Rob, these are botfly larvae, Dermatobia hominis. She angled the magnifying glass so he could see. Under the bright light, the bumps moved, actually moved. Rob's stomach lurched. How? He gripped the examination table to steady himself. We're in Maine. Aren't those tropical? Usually, yes. But eggs can survive for years in fabric, old materials, stored gear. She watched his face carefully. Do you have military equipment stored at home? Old uniforms, duffel bags, anything like that? Rob's expression changed, a look of dawning horror mixed with recognition. My footlocker, from Iraq. It's been in the shed for 20 years. Does Max sleep near it? Rob nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The eggs likely survived in the fabric, Dr. Walsh explained. Botflies lay eggs in organic material. When Max had contact with contaminated items, the larvae transferred and burrowed under his skin. They've been feeding on his tissue for weeks. She pulled up the X-ray machine, positioned Max carefully. The machine buzzed and clicked. Moments later, the film showed Max's spine and ribcage in stark black and white. Dr. Walsh's finger traced several bright white spots scattered throughout the tissue. These metal fragments, she said quietly, they're not from any recent injury. These are old, decades old. Rob stared at the bright spots on the film, each one a piece of his past, embedded in his dog. Shrapnel, he said. The word felt heavy as lead. From my gear, the footlocker. Dr. Walsh turned from the X-ray to look at Rob directly. For a long moment she just watched him, watched how he stood, slightly protective of his left side, watched his hand move unconsciously to touch his lower back. The fourth time she'd seen him do it since entering the room. Watched the careful way he held his body, like something hurt, but he'd learned to live with it. Mr. Harrison. Her voice carried the weight of certainty. Lift your shirt. This is about Max, not me. I'm a doctor. I've been trained to see things people try to hide. She crossed her arms. Lift your shirt. I'm fine. You've favored your back since you walked through that door. You've touched it repeatedly. You just told me you have 20-year-old contaminated military gear that infected your dog. She paused. And Max got this from material you own, material you've been in contact with. Rob and Dr. Walsh stared at each other across the examination table. 10 seconds of silence stretched like hours. In the background, Max's breathing provided a ragged soundtrack. If you won't lift it, Dr. Walsh said quietly, I'm calling an ambulance. For you. You can't watch me. She already had her phone in her hand. Something in her expression, the absolute certainty, the refusal to back down, broke through Rob's defenses. Slowly, with the reluctance of a man approaching his own execution, he turned around and lifted the back of his shirt. Dr. Walsh drew in a sharp breath. 3 large bumps, each the size of a quarter, marked his lower back. Black discharge had crusted around the edges. The skin had taken on a grayish-red color, clearly infected tissue spreading outward. When she moved closer, she could feel the heat radiating from them, fever-hot. Wrong. How long? Her voice was carefully controlled. 3 weeks. The words came out barely above a whisper. Jesus Christ, Rob. She stepped back, already making decisions. I need to x-ray Max for surgery planning, but while that's processing, you need to hear this clearly. You're going to a hospital. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. Max first. Rob, you could be septic. I said Max first. His voice carried a stubborn finality she recognized. The same tone he'd used when refusing to leave his old retriever's side during that dog's final night. The same look Beth probably saw when she tried to get him to see doctors. This was a man who would die for his dog, rather than face his own mortality. Dr. Walsh made a decision. Fine, I'll operate on Max. Surgery will take 4 to 6 hours. She pulled out her phone and held it toward him. But you're calling your daughter, right now, while I prep for surgery. I don't want to worry her. She's going to be a lot more worried at your funeral. She pressed the phone into his hand. Call her, or I sedate you two and call her myself. Rob stared at the phone in his hand. Sarah's contact information glowed on the screen. The last time he'd called her, not her calling him, but him calling her, had been 4 years ago, standing in the funeral home parking lot. Your mother's gone. Don't come back for a while. I need space. She never had come back. His thumb hovered over her name. The phone felt impossibly heavy, carrying the weight of 4 years of silence, of weekly 4-minute calls that satisfied duty, but never touched truth. I need to prep Max now, Dr. Walsh said, her voice gentler. Please, Rob. Call your daughter. She moved to the intercom, pressed the button. Dr. Chen to exam 3, emergency surgery prep. Orderlies appeared to wheel Max to the surgical suite. Rob watched through the glass partition as they transferred his dog to the operating table, fitted the anesthesia mask over his snout. Max's eyes found his one last time before closing. Rob's hand pressed against the glass, his voice breaking. Come back to me, boy. The surgical waiting room became Rob's prison. Beige walls that seemed to close in with each passing minute. Commercial carpet worn thin by years of anxious pacing. Fluorescent lights that hummed with a frequency that made his teeth ache. A clock on the wall read 8:15. Rob counted his steps from wall to wall. 22. He walked the length again. 22. And again, he couldn't sit. His body wouldn't allow stillness, as if movement could somehow reach through walls and keep Max's heart beating. By 9:30, the fever he'd been ignoring announced itself with full force. The room temperature held steady at 72 degrees, but sweat soaked through his shirt. Each of the 3 bumps on his back throbbed in rhythm with his heartbeat, a grotesque pulse that made him nauseous. When he stood too quickly, the room tilted. He ignored all of it. The door opened. Dr. Walsh emerged, still in scrubs, surgical mask pulled down around her neck. Her face carried an expression Rob couldn't read. He stood so fast his vision blurred. He's in surgery. Dr. Chen is operating. She raised a hand to stop his next question. I'm not the one in there because I called Boston General Hospital. You have an appointment at 2 p.m. with their trauma surgery department. I'm not leaving, Max. Surgery takes 4 to 6 hours minimum. Boston is 2 hours away. You have time. Dr. Walsh's voice remained firm, professional. You'll be back before he wakes up. I said no. Dr. Walsh pulled out her phone without breaking eye contact. Then I'm calling your daughter. Don't. The word came out sharper than intended. You won't take care of yourself. Maybe she can make you. Her finger moved toward the screen. Dr. Walsh, please. She was already dialing. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered, alert despite the early hour. Hello? Miss Harrison? This is Dr. Rebecca Walsh. I'm your father's veterinarian. A pause, then urgency flooded the voice. Is Max okay? Is Dad okay? Max is in emergency surgery. Your father, Dr. Walsh chose her words carefully. I need you to come home. He has infected botfly larvae, possible sepsis. He's refusing treatment. Silence on the other end of the line stretched for 3 heartbeats. I'm in Boston. I can be there in 2 hours. The line went dead. Rob stared at Dr. Walsh with a mixture of betrayal and relief fighting for dominance on his face. She met his gaze without flinching. You can be angry with me. I can live with that. Her voice softened slightly. What I can't live with is watching you die slowly when I have the power to do something about it. She turned and walked back toward the surgical suite, leaving Rob alone with his anger, his fear, and his phone still clutched in his hand with a call he hadn't made. He sank into one of the waiting room chairs, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. Head in his hands, he let himself admit what he'd been avoiding for weeks. She was right. Of course she was right. He was dying slowly, had been for years. It started when Beth died, or had it? And it really started 20 years ago in Iraqi sand with a bullet in his back and a choice to stay silent. The clock hands crawled. 9:45, 10 o'clock, 10:30. At 11, the waiting room door opened. Sarah rushed in, still wearing yesterday's work clothes, charcoal slacks and a white blouse, both wrinkled from 2 hours of anxious driving. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail. No makeup. Dark circles under eyes that were Beth's eyes, looking out from a face that was Beth's face, 20 years younger. She saw Rob and stopped. They stood 10 feet apart. Both crossed their arms simultaneously, a mirror image of defensive posture neither consciously chose. Their eyes met briefly, then slid away to safer territory. The floor, the walls, anywhere but each other. 4 years of distance occupied the 10 feet of linoleum between them. Sarah broke the silence first. Dr. Walsh said you're infected. How bad? Max is worse. He's in surgery now. Her voice rose. I didn't ask about Max. I asked about you. I'm fine. Fine? The word exploded from her. You're fine? The vet had to call me because you wouldn't. I left you a voicemail. A voicemail? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, are you serious right now? Your dog is dying, you're infected with parasites, and you left me a voicemail? I didn't want to worry you. Worry me? I've been worried for 4 years. Her hands gestured sharply, punctuating each word. Ever since you shut me out at Mom's funeral, I gave you space, like you wanted. Like I wanted? The words came out strangled. You told me go back to Boston. I need space. Space, Dad. I thought you meant a month. Maybe 2, not 4 years. You seemed fine with it. You stopped calling. Because every time I did, you said you were fine. Sarah's voice cracked. Everything's fine. The boat's fine, I'm fine, but you're not fine. She pointed at him, her hand shaking. Look at you. When's the last time you ate a real meal? Slept through the night? Had a conversation with another human being that lasted more than 4 minutes? Rob said nothing. There was nothing to say, because she was right about all of it. You're dying, Dad. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And you won't let anyone help you. The wall he'd built around himself cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough for the truth to seep through. I don't know how. His voice broke on the last word. I don't know how to ask for help. I never learned. Your grandfather didn't. I didn't. We handle things. We endure. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time in years. But I'm so tired, Sarah. I'm so tired of enduring. The anger drained from Sarah's face, replaced by something that looked like grief. She saw her father clearly for the first time since the funeral. Not the stoic rock who'd given the eulogy without tears, but a man who was broken, scared, and desperately human. She crossed the 10 feet between them. Then let me help you. Before Rob could respond, the door to the surgical area opened. Dr. Chen emerged, an Asian woman in her 40s, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Her surgical scrubs showed dark spots where she'd been working for hours. Sarah and Rob stood together, united by fear. Max is stable. Surgery was successful. Rob exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. His knees actually buckled slightly. Sarah's hand caught his elbow, steadying him. We removed 17 botfly larvae. Dr. Chen held up a glass jar. Inside, 17 white larvae lay motionless now, preserved in solution. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. The larvae were embedded deep in muscle tissue. Some were very close to major blood vessels. Dr. Chen's voice remained clinical, but compassion leaked through. We had a crisis midway through surgery. His heart rate spiked dramatically. Blood pressure dropped. We almost lost him. Rob swayed. Sarah's grip on his arm tightened. But we stabilized him. He's in recovery now. The next 24 hours are critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Dr. Chen pulled out a small evidence bag from her pocket. Inside lay a tiny piece of metal, rusted and corroded, no bigger than a pencil eraser. We found this. One of the larvae had actually wrapped itself around it. Rob stared at the fragment. Sarah looked from the metal to her father's face, watching recognition dawn. What is that? She asked. Rob's voice came out hollow. Shrapnel, from Iraq. This was inside Max? Dr. Chen's professional mask slipped for a moment, showing genuine confusion. Dr. Walsh entered behind Dr. Chen, having finished cleaning up from the prep work. No, It was in the environment. Contaminated material Max had contact with. She looked directly at Rob. "The footlocker you mentioned. We need to see it. It should be treated as biohazard material." Sarah turned to her father. "Dad, what footlocker?" "From Iraq, 2004. I kept—" He struggled to find words. "Some things. Gear, medals, letters." A pause that stretched too long. "Shrapnel." Dr. Walsh's expression hardened with understanding. 20-year-old battlefield debris can carry dormant parasites, bacteria, all manner of pathogens. If Max got infected from environmental contamination— She let the sentence hang, but her eyes on Rob finished the thought. Sarah's voice came out small, scared. "You're not just infected on the outside." Rob nodded once, sharp and final. "You've been carrying infection inside you for 20 years. It wasn't a question. 20 years, 2 months, 13 days. The precision of his answer told them he'd counted every single one. Dr. Walsh stepped forward. "Rob, you need a trauma surgeon. Not tomorrow, today, right now. Can I see Max first?" The two doctors exchanged a glance. Dr. Walsh nodded. 5 minutes, then you're getting in a car to Boston. Non-negotiable. The recovery room smelled of antiseptic and anesthesia. Max lay in a large cage, his body wrapped in warming blankets, an IV line running to his front leg. His breathing came steady and deep. The gray muzzle rose and fell with each breath, the most beautiful sight Rob had seen in weeks. Rob knelt beside the cage, fingers threading through the metal bars to touch Max's paw. The dog's toes twitched at the contact. "Thank you for saving me, boy," Rob whispered. Sarah stood behind him. "What?" Rob didn't look away from Max. "He got sick, so I couldn't ignore it anymore. If he'd been fine, I'd have let myself die without ever knowing. But I couldn't let him die." His voice cracked. "I couldn't lose him, too. So he forced me to face it." "You're saying Max saved your life by almost dying?" "Yeah." Rob stroked Max's paw gently. "That's exactly what I'm saying." Dr. Walsh appeared in the doorway. "Time's up. Sarah, get your father to Boston General. I've already called ahead. Dr. Michael Stevens is expecting you at 2 p.m. Don't be late." Sarah helped her father stand, his body moving like a man decades older than 52. "Come on, Dad. Let's go get you fixed." As they walked toward the parking lot, Rob took one last look back at the recovery room where Max slept, breathing and alive. Then he followed his daughter toward the car, toward Boston, toward truth he'd been avoiding for 20 years. The first 30 minutes of the drive passed in silence. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the highway stretching north toward Boston. Rob sat in the passenger seat, the first time he hadn't driven himself anywhere in years. The role reversal felt uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and strangely necessary. He watched the main coastline blur past the window. Fishing boats bobbed in harbors. Lighthouses stood sentinel over rocky shores. Home. He wondered distantly if he'd see it again. At mile 45, Sarah finally spoke. "Why didn't you get the shrapnel removed in 2004? "Complicated. We have 2 hours. Uncomplicated." Rob remained silent, watching a seagull wheel overhead. "Dad, please," her voice softened. "I need to understand." The words came slowly, carefully, like he was diffusing something that might explode. "I had to testify. against my commanding officer.
About what? War crimes.
Sarah's hands tightened on the wheel, but she kept her eyes on the road. What kind? The kind that kills civilians. Rob's voice remained flat, emotionless, the tone of a man reciting facts he'd memorized. Captain Morrison ordered an airstrike on a village. Intel said it was an insurgent hideout. A pause. It wasn't. How many? 14 people died. Sarah didn't respond, giving him space to continue at his own pace. I was the radio operator. I saw the real intelligence photos. They showed families, children, a school building converted to a shelter. His hand moved unconsciously to touch his lower back. When I refused to lie in the after-action report, Morrison knew he'd face court-martial. So what happened? Night before my testimony, someone shot me during patrol. Sarah's foot lifted slightly off the gas pedal. The car slowed.
Someone shot you? Who? Never saw their face. The Army said it was shrapnel from mortar fire, but you knew different. It wasn't a question. Rob nodded. The pain was wrong. The angle was wrong. I'd seen real shrapnel wounds. This wasn't that. Why didn't you say something? No proof, my word against an officer's, and I was 19, enlisted, nobody important. He watched the landscape change from coastal Maine to inland New Hampshire. The field surgeon said I needed 6-hour surgery to remove all the fragments, but I was scheduled to testify in 8 hours. Sarah pulled the car over to a rest stop, unable to drive and process this simultaneously. She parked and turned to face her father. So you chose testimony over surgery. 14 people were dead. Someone needed to speak for them. And you've been carrying that bullet, that shrapnel, for 20 years because you chose justice for them over healing for yourself. When you put it that way, it sounds noble. It wasn't. I was just angry and young and stupid enough to think I was invincible. Sarah studied her father's face, seeing him clearly, perhaps for the first time. Not the distant figure who'd pushed her away, but a man who'd made an impossible choice at 19 and paid for it every day since. Mom knew, didn't she? Rob's eyes closed. I told her on our wedding night. She made me promise I'd get the shrapnel removed, see a doctor, take care of myself. His voice cracked. I promised. Then I broke that promise for 16 years until cancer took her. She'd forgive you. I haven't forgiven myself. Sarah reached across the center console and took her father's hand, the first intentional physical contact between them in 4 years. His hand felt rough, weathered, trembling slightly. Then let's start now, she said, together. They sat like that for a long moment, father and daughter, the gulf between them finally beginning to close. Sarah pulled back onto the highway. The silence that followed felt different, not empty, but full of things beginning to heal. At 1:30, they crossed into Boston's city limits. The skyline rose before them, glass and steel towers catching afternoon sun. Sarah navigated through increasingly dense traffic toward Boston General Hospital, a massive complex of brick buildings that sprawled across several city blocks. The emergency department entrance loomed ahead. Sarah pulled into the circular drive marked Ambulance and Emergency Only and parked directly in front. You can't park here, Rob said automatically. Watch me. She came around to help him out. Inside, the triage nurse took one look at Rob and called for immediate assessment. Temperature, 102.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Blood pressure, 155/98. Heart rate, 112. Respiratory rate, 26 breaths per minute. When the nurse lifted Rob's shirt to check the infection site, her professional composure cracked. Jesus, how long have these been here? Few weeks. Few weeks. She made an urgent note on his chart, underlining it twice. Doctor needs to see this immediately. 20 minutes later, a man entered the examination room. Late 60s, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain around his neck. His name tag read, Dr. Michael Stevens, Trauma Surgery. He picked up Rob's chart, eyes scanning the information. Iraq veteran, retained shrapnel. Never followed up for... He looked up at Rob's face and stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened in recognition. Harrison. Robert Harrison. Army Rangers. Rob straightened despite his fever. Yes, sir. Dr. Stevens sat down heavily in the chair, looking like he'd seen a ghost. I was the field surgeon at FOB Echo, March 2004. His voice carried equal parts disbelief and something like wonder. You're the kid who refused surgery to testify against Captain Morrison. The room seemed to shrink. Of all the doctors in all the hospitals in America, the universe had delivered Rob to the one man who'd tried to save him 20 years ago. I've thought about you over the years, Dr. Stevens continued quietly. Wondered if you made it home. If that shrapnel caused problems. He looked at Sarah, then back to Rob. Never thought I'd be the one to finally take it out. Dr. Stevens ordered immediate imaging. At 3 o'clock, Rob lay motionless inside the CT scanner, the machine whirring and clicking around him like some mechanical predator examining its prey. Sarah watched from the observation room, her reflection ghostly in the glass that separated her from her father. 20 minutes later, Dr. Stevens pulled up the images on a large monitor. The grayscale cross-sections of Rob's body revealed what had been hiding for 2 decades. Bright white spots scattered throughout his lower back and hip region, like stars in a dark sky. 11 separate metal fragments, Dr. Stevens said, his finger tracing each one on the screen. Sarah stood beside him, counting them silently. 11 pieces of war living inside her father's body. The doctor zoomed in on the largest fragment. It appeared as a bright, elongated shape, roughly 3.5 centimeters long, positioned near the spine with terrible precision. This piece here, Dr. Stevens' finger hovered over it without touching the screen, as if even the image demanded respect. It's sitting 2 millimeters from your spinal cord. 2 millimeters. Less than the thickness of a nickel. He turned to look at Rob, who'd been wheeled into the observation room still wearing the hospital gown. One wrong move. A fall downstairs, a car accident, even just twisting wrong to pick something up, and this could have severed your spinal cord any time in the last 20 years. Permanent paralysis from the waist down. He paused to let that sink in. You've been walking around with a loaded gun pointed at your spine. Sarah's hand found her father's, squeezing hard. Rob stared at the image, seeing for the first time the thing that had lived inside him, the constant companion of his pain. The blood work came back, Dr. Stevens continued, pulling up another screen. White blood cell count is 19,500. Normal is 4,000 to 11,000. Your C-reactive protein is 135 milligrams per liter, should be under 10. And your blood cultures are growing multiple bacteria. What does that mean? Sarah's voice was tight. Sepsis. Early stage, but progressing.
Dr. Stevens removed his glasses, cleaned them on his shirt, a nervous gesture that made him seem suddenly human rather than clinical. We need to operate within 8 hours. Every hour we wait, the infection spreads further into his bloodstream. Eventually, it will reach vital organs. Rob finally spoke, his voice hoarse from fever and fear. If you don't operate, within 3 to 5 days, the sepsis will become septic shock, multi-organ failure, then death. The word hung in the air like smoke. Do you consent to surgery? Rob looked at Sarah, really looked at her, seeing Beth's eyes looking back at him, seeing the daughter he'd pushed away, seeing 4 years of distance he'd created to protect her from his grief, or maybe to protect himself from having to heal. If I don't make it, he started. Stop! Sarah's voice came out fierce. You'll make it! We have too much time to make up for. But if I don't, there are things you need to know. Dr. Stevens checked his watch. I'll give you some time. But Rob, we need you in surgery by 6 o'clock tonight. That's 3 hours. After the doctor left, Sarah went to Rob's truck in the parking lot and retrieved his old canvas duffel bag. It smelled of salt water and diesel fuel, of a life lived on fishing boats and in avoidance of anything deeper than the ocean. In the hospital room, Rob opened the duffel with shaking hands. From the bottom, wrapped in an old t-shirt, he pulled out a wooden box. Sarah had never seen it before. What is that? Everything I couldn't throw away, everything I couldn't look at. He opened it. The bronze star medal lay on top, its ribbon faded, the metal tarnished from 2 decades without polishing. Rob lifted it carefully, as if it might burn him. They gave me this for actions I'm not proud of, he said, for following orders that killed civilians. Then for having the guts to admit it happened and testify. Sarah touched the medal gently. That took courage. Felt like cowardice at the time, still does most days. Beneath the medal lay 4 small pieces of metal, dark, corroded, still carrying traces of Iraqi sand. These are the pieces they did remove, Rob explained, in the field hospital. I kept them as reminders. Of what? Of what silence costs. Next came dog tags, but not Rob's own. The name stamped into the metal read SGT Matthew Wright. My best friend, Rob said, his voice barely above a whisper. March 15th, 2004. We were on patrol. Ambush. Grenade landed right in the middle of 6 of us. Matthew threw himself on it. Sarah's hand covered her mouth. He had a wife. A 15-year-old son. He chose 6 guys he'd known for 8 months over going home to them. Rob traced the letters on the dog tags. I wear my own. I keep his. A photograph came next. 8 young soldiers in desert camouflage, barely old enough to buy beer, trying to look tough for the camera. 3 faces had been circled in faded red ink. The only ones who made it home, Rob said, pointing. Carson died in 2006, overdose. Rodriguez shot himself in 2008. Couldn't live with what we saw. And you? Sarah asked quietly. I lived with it by not living at all. At the bottom of the box lay an envelope, yellowed with age, addressed in careful script. The writing was in Arabic, but someone had written below it in English. American soldier Harrison, who saved my children. You never opened it? Rob shook his head. Too afraid. Of what? of confirmation that I failed, that the 14 who died could have been saved if I'd done more, been faster, been braver. Sarah picked up the envelope, felt its weight. Should we open it? Now? After surgery. Rob's voice carried a finality that said he'd made up his mind. If I make it. When you make it, Sarah corrected firmly. When, Rob agreed, though his eyes said he wasn't sure. At the very bottom of the duffel, wrapped in plastic to preserve it, Sarah found a blue shirt, women's size. She lifted it out, recognizing it immediately. Mom's, she whispered. Tuesday was our day, Rob said. 46 years. Both wearing blue. After she died, I couldn't wash it. It still smells like her perfume if you hold it close enough. Sarah brought the shirt to her face, breathing in the faint scent of the mother she'd lost 4 years ago. Tears came freely now. Can I wear it? She asked. During your surgery? Rob nodded, unable to speak. At 5:30, the orderlies arrived. The anesthesiologist explained the procedure in clinical terms that washed over Rob without really registering. Dr. Stevens appeared, already scrubbed, wearing surgical gear, his eyes visible over the mask, showing both confidence and concern. 8 hours, he told Sarah. Maybe more. The fragments have been embedded for 20 years. Tissue has grown around them. We'll need to be extremely careful near the spinal cord. Sarah nodded, wearing her mother's blue shirt, feeling like she was carrying Beth with her into this moment. They began wheeling Rob toward the operating room. Halfway down the corridor, he grabbed the bed rail. Wait! The orderlies stopped. Sarah moved to his side. I love you, Rob said, the words coming out raw and honest. I'm sorry I didn't say it enough. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry for 4 years of I'm fine when I was dying inside. I love you too, Dad. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, dripping onto her mother's blue shirt. Tell your mom. His voice broke. Tell her I kept my promise. Finally. 20 years late, but I kept it. Tell her yourself when you wake up, Sarah said, trying to smile through tears. The doors to the operating room swung open. Rob disappeared through them, and Sarah was alone in the hallway, wearing her mother's shirt, holding her father's life in her hands, like something fragile and precious and terrifying. She found her way to the surgical waiting room, the same beige walls and fluorescent lights that were apparently universal to hospitals everywhere, the same uncomfortable chairs, the same clock on the wall that would move too slowly for the next 8 hours. Sarah pulled out her phone. She should call someone. But who? Rob had isolated himself so completely there was no one to call. No friends stopping by. No community checking in. Just him and Max and the ocean and the slowly killing silence. She looked at the time. 6:07 p.m. Surgery had begun. Sarah began to count her steps from wall to wall, just like her father had done that morning. 22 steps. Genetic, she thought. We're more alike than either of us wanted to admit. She settled into a chair, pulled her mother's blue shirt tighter around herself, and prepared to wait. Inside operating room 3, Dr. Stevens made the first incision at 6:34 p.m. A 10-inch vertical line along Rob's spine, precise and controlled. The tissue beneath told the story of 20 years, scarred, inflamed, invaded by metal that didn't belong.
Significant tissue necrosis around the fragments, Dr. Stevens reported to his assistant, Dr. Chen. We'll need to debride extensively before we can safely extract. For 2 hours, they worked with painstaking care. Each fragment had to be isolated from the surrounding tissue, blood vessels mapped and protected, nerves identified and avoided. One wrong move, one slip of the scalpel, and Rob would wake up paralyzed. By 9 o'clock, they'd removed 4 smaller fragments successfully. But the largest one, the one sitting 2 millimeters from the spinal cord, still remained. Dr. Stevens studied it through magnified surgical loops, his gloved hands steady despite 2 hours of intense concentration. The fragment had embedded itself in muscle tissue directly adjacent to a major nerve bundle, its tip actually touching the protective membrane around the spinal cord. "If I pull straight out, I could sever the nerve," he said quietly. "Permanent paralysis from the waist down." Dr. Chen's voice came through her mask. "And if we leave it, the infection will kill him within days." Dr. Stevens made his decision. Micro-incision. We take it out in pieces. For 77 minutes, he worked with instruments so small they looked like they belonged to a jeweler rather than a surgeon, fragmenting the shrapnel piece by microscopic piece. Rob's blood pressure rose even under deep anesthesia, his body's stress response to the invasion clear on every monitor. At 10:47 p.m., disaster struck. The scalpel nicked a small artery hidden beneath scar tissue. Blood welled up instantly, obscuring the surgical field. "Suction!" Dr. Stevens' voice remained controlled but urgent. "I need to see the bleeder." Dr. Chen worked the suction tube, trying to clear the blood, but it kept coming. The monitors began their terrible chorus of alarms. Blood pressure dropping, 120/80, 90/60, 70/40. Heart rate climbing, 98, 125, 155. In the surgical waiting room, Sarah jerked awake in her chair. She'd dozed off around 9:30, exhausted from the emotional strain and 2 hours of driving. The wall clock read 10:48 p.m., 4 hours since surgery began. 4 more to go, Dr. Stevens had said. She had no way of knowing that at that exact moment her father was bleeding out on the operating table. Dr. Stevens worked with the precision born from 40 years of trauma surgery. Decades of war zones, car accidents, shootings, all of it came down to this moment, this vessel, this man who'd refused surgery 20 years ago to speak for the dead. Clamp, suture, cauterize. The bleeding stopped. Slowly, incrementally, the blood pressure began climbing back toward normal. 70, 40, 85/50, 100 divided by 65. Got it, Dr. Stevens breathed. Let's keep going. At 11:15 p.m., removing what appeared to be the final fragment, Dr. Stevens paused. The shape felt wrong. Too smooth, too regular. He held it under the surgical light. "This isn't shrapnel." Dr. Chen looked closer. "What is it?" "Get me a portable X-ray now." The machine was wheeled in, positioned over the surgical site. The image appeared on the screen instantly, and Dr. Stevens' suspicions were confirmed. A small metal cylinder, unmistakable even after 20 years. A .45 caliber bullet casing. And its trajectory, clearly visible in the X-ray, showed it hadn't been traveling outward from an explosion. It had been going in. Shot from behind, traveling toward the spine. "This man was shot," Dr. Stevens said slowly, "from behind.
and someone went to great lengths to make it look like shrapnel wounds. The surgical team exchanged glances, but no one spoke. They all understood what this meant. Attempted murder disguised as a combat injury. "We discuss this with him when he wakes," Dr. Stevens decided. "Right now, we finish the job." By 2:30 a.m., all 11 fragments had been removed and placed in evidence bags. The bullet casing sat in its own separate container. 22 separate incisions had been closed with careful sutures. The infected tissue had been debrided, the bleeding controlled.
"He's stable," the anesthesiologist reported. "Ready for recovery." Dr. Stevens stripped off his gloves, exhausted but satisfied. 9 hours of surgery. "Let's wake him up." In the ICU recovery room at 4 a.m., Rob surfaced slowly from anesthesia. Sounds came first, rhythmic beeping, the hiss of ventilation, hushed voices speaking in medical shorthand. Then smell. Antiseptic, clean sheets, the metallic taste from intubation. Light filtered through his closed eyelids, too bright, making him wince. "Mr. Harrison, surgery's over. You're in recovery." The nurse's voice was calm, professional. "I'm going to remove your breathing tube. I need you to cough for me." The tube slid out. Rob gagged, coughed, his throat raw and aching. "Sarah?" The word came out as a hoarse whisper. "I'll get her." Moments later, or maybe hours, time felt strange. Sarah rushed through the door. She still wore Beth's blue shirts, now wrinkled from sleeping in waiting room chairs. Her face showed exhaustion, relief, and something that looked like joy, all fighting for dominance. She saw Rob awake and broke down crying. "Dad, you made it." Rob tried to smile, but his face felt swollen, disconnected. "Told you. Tough as a Maine lobster." Dr. Stevens entered, still in surgical scrubs despite the hour. "Surgery successful. Removed all 11 fragments." He pulled up X-ray images showing Rob's spine clear of metal for the first time in 20 years. "Plus, we found something else." A pause that carried weight. "A bullet, not shrapnel. Based on trajectory, it was fired from behind you, traveling toward your spine." Rob's eyes closed. He'd suspected for 20 years, but confirmation felt like a different kind of wound opening. Sarah's face went white. "Someone tried to kill you?" "Morrison," Rob said quietly, opening his eyes. "It was Captain Morrison." "You knew?" Dr. Stevens asked. "Suspected. Never could prove it." Rob's voice gained strength. "Now we can." The brief moment of hope flickered in the sterile room. Sarah squeezed her father's hand. "You can rest now." "It's over." Rob looked at his daughter, wanted to believe her, but 20 years of carrying that weight made him cautious. "Is it?" "The infection is gone. The shrapnel is gone. The bullet is evidence." "It's over, Dad." Rob let himself hope, just a little. His eyes drifted closed, and he fell into the first peaceful sleep he'd had in 20 years. But at 10 a.m., 6 hours later, the monitors erupted into urgent alarms. Sarah jerked awake in the chair beside his bed. Nurses rushed in, moving with controlled urgency that barely masked panic. Rob's fever had spiked to 104.6 degrees Fahrenheit. His blood pressure was dropping, 145/95, 88/52, still falling. Heart rate climbing to 142. The surgical site had turned angry red, swollen, with cloudy discharge that smelled wrong. "Get Dr. Stevens," the lead nurse ordered. "Now!" Sometimes the smallest things we ignore
become the loudest warnings we need. Robert Harrison thought it was just a pimple on his back, something minor, something that would go away. But that tiny bump held a 20-year secret that nearly cost him everything: his life, his daughter, and the truth about people he'd saved without knowing it. For 2 decades he carried shrapnel, guilt, and silence, believing strength meant suffering alone. It took his loyal companion Max getting critically ill to force Rob to finally face his own hidden wounds. What he discovered changed everything. The bumps weren't just parasites. They were connected to a bullet he'd carried since Iraq, an attempted murder covered up, and a beautiful truth that his courage had given families the gift of life. This story reminds us that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That the walls we build to protect ourselves often become the prisons that destroy us. And that it's never too late to heal, to reconnect, to tell the truth we've been hiding. What tiny bumps in your own life have you been ignoring that might be trying to tell you something bigger? Have you ever discovered that something you thought was your greatest failure was actually your greatest gift? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.